All right, so tonight, Zechariah chapter 6. Uh, this is actually the 12th session already. The 12th session, and it's page 51 in your syllabus. Tonight, we're going to finish out the eighth vision on that 24th day of the 11th month in the second year of Darius, and then we'll go to the end of chapter 6. Then after this week, I'm not going to spend as much time as we did going over these visions. So I kind of expect that we'll do four more sessions. We'll do a total of 16, and we'll do a couple chapters at a time starting next week as we go through the rest of the book of Zechariah. But tonight we'll finish out the eighth vision. So we are here, the eighth vision. This is on the 11th month, 24th day in the second year of Darius. And tonight, the Lord's chariots patrol the earth. Zechariah chapter 6. So here's the vision on this eighth vision. Zechariah 6, 1 through 8. Now, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, four chariots were coming forth from between two mountains, and the mountains were bronze mountains. With the first chariot were red horses, the second chariot, black horses, with the third chariot, white horses, and with the fourth chariot, strong, dappled horses. Then I spoke and said to the angel who was with me, "What are these, my Lord?" The angel replied to me, "These are the four spirits of heaven, going forth after standing before the Lord of all the earth, with one of which the black horses are going forth to the north country, and the white ones go forth after them, while the dappled ones go forth to the south country." When the strong ones went out, they were eager to go to patrol the earth. And he said, "Go patrol the earth." And they patrolled the earth. Then he cried out to me and spoke to me, saying, "See, those who are going forth to the land of the north hath appeased my wrath in the land of the north." So let's get into this. First of all, in this vision, there's four chariots. The first vision, there were horses that went out to patrol the earth. In this vision, there's chariots. And I want to kind of show you in the scriptures a very, I think, distinction about the use of chariots. And often chariots are used in war or battle. For instance, here's a few verses on this. Isaiah 43:17, who brings forth the chariot and the horse, the army and the mighty man. Zechariah 9:10, which will come up later, I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the horse from Jerusalem, and the bow of war will be cut off. And Revelation 9, verse 9, they had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots, of many horses rushing to battle. So the first horses went out to patrol the earth kind of as a reconnaissance to observe. These, I think, very well could represent the final battle um, in the final end of the age. But we'll see as we get into this. Now, with these chariots, they are led by horses. First chariot is led by red horses. The second chariot is led by black horses. The third chariot is led by white horses. And the fourth chariot is led by strong, dappled horses. Now, we looked over the horses a little bit in the first vision. And again, I don't have a real one way or the other of understanding this. I do think there probably is a correlation between these colored horses here and the four horsemen of Revelation, which are also four colored horses. I don't know much more about it than that, but here are the four horses mentioned in Revelation chapter 6. In Revelation 6:2, the first is a white horse, and that horse went out conquering. It represents conquering. It had a bow, was given to him to conquer, and he went out conquering. The second seal was a red horse, and on the red horse it was granted to take peace from the earth, that men would slay one another. A great sword was given to him, so it kind of indicates war with the red horse. The black horse is a third seal. Black horse, he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hands, a quart of wheat for a denarius, which kind of represents poverty, famine. And I think the black horse perhaps represents that. And then the fourth seal there in Revelation is an ashen, which I think is the same as the dappled horse here in Zechariah. And that horse represents death and Hades. The Asian horse, as he who sat on it, had the name Death, and Hades was following with him to kill with a sword and with famine and with pestilence and with the wild beasts of the earth. So that's as much as I know about the horses. Maybe someone has time to look into it more. But these are what are leading the chariots, these four different colored horses. And those are what happened when the four colored horses are brought up in the book of Revelation. So here I want to spend a little time on this because this I found pretty interesting, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. When he lifts up and he sees the chariots, they're coming forth from between, it says, between the two mountains. They come forth from between the two mountains, and these mountains are bronze mountains. Well, what's up with the two mountains? What are the two mountains? I found a few interesting commentaries. This is from my New English Translation Bible. And the Hebrew two mountains, and the mountains were mountains of bronze. This has been simplified in the translation for the stylistic reason. Bronze, a hard, almost impenetrable metal, is an apt figure to speak of the obstacles standing in the way of the accomplishment of God's purpose to the post-exilic Jewish community. So I don't think that's what it means, but they put this as that maybe it represents the obstacles. But it sounds to me they're coming out from these mountains, that they're not trying to go through these mountains. So I'm not sure about that. But then it says the cleft between the two from which the chariots emerge might be related to the eschatological triumph of Yahweh, who will return to the Mount of Olives and divide it into two mountains, one on the north and the other on the south. Now that I find kind of interesting. And especially since this comes up later in Zechariah 14 about Mount of Olives splits in two. So that is intriguing. I thought that the REV version, this I think makes a lot of sense, and I'll show you this. The two mountains, given both the future context of the prophecy and the fact that Zechariah was in Jerusalem when he saw the vision, the two mountains are almost certainly Mount Zion, where the temple was, and the Mount of Olives. The Hebrew text calls them the two mountains, indicating they were well-known mountains. And the two most prominent mountains from Jerusalem are Mount Zion and the Mount of Olives. Furthermore, the mountains were bronze. The bronze indicates strength, which is inherent in Christ's future kingdom on earth. Also, however, bronze often represents judgment. In the Bible, bronze, miscalled brass in some English Bibles, was associated with judgment and justification. And that certainly seems to be the case here in Zechariah 6:1. When Christ is king over the earth, judgment and justice will go forth from Jerusalem, and there will be great peace and safety on earth because Jesus will rule with a rod of iron. And some references, Psalms 2:9, Revelation 2:27, 12:5, and 19:15, if you want to jot those verse reference, if you're interested in looking at where Christ will rule out of Jerusalem. In the millennial kingdom, when Christ rules the earth, he will rule from Mount Zion. Again, Psalm 2, verse 6, Psalm 110, verse 2, and then Ezekiel's chapters 40 through 48. But this, I think, makes a lot of sense. And he says, continues, more evidence the two mountains are Mount Zion and the Mount of Olives is that the angelic chariots go out to the north and to the south. But north and south of where? Where are they starting from? The logical place would be Mount Zion and Jerusalem. That is where God's house, the temple, will be, and where the city of Jerusalem will be. Also, Jerusalem was the place where Zechariah was when he saw the vision, and so north and south to him would be north and south from Jerusalem. Now, I want to point out something that's not quite accurate with this statement. There's actually a Mount Zion, there's a Mount of Olives, but the temple is actually, as we have seen, on Mount Moriah. Mount Zion or Zion can represent that physical mountain that's in Jerusalem. Also, Zion represents the entire city of Jerusalem. So it can represent both. But when we're talking about the physical mountain of Zion, it's slightly different. And I want to show you this. Before I get to showing you the physical location, this I found, and I think this makes sense. In Zechariah 1:8, the first vision, the very first vision, he sees a man riding on a red horse, and he was standing among the myrtle trees, which were in the ravine. A very interesting notation in the NET, which I found, was that the LXX, if you ever see LXX in any commentaries, it means the Greek Septuagint. The Greek Septuagint presupposes the Hebrew harim, or mountains, rather than the Masoretic text, which is hadasim, myrtles, probably because of the reference to the ravine. So I looked up the Greek Septuagint. Here's what the Septuagint says during that first vision. I saw by the night, and behold, a man mounted on a red horse, and he stood between the shady mountains. So it would make sense if the first vision saw these mountains, that the last vision comes back around to these mountains. Again, I don't have a real big opinion on it, but I found that interesting because the other thing is that many English translations call the ravine here in Zechariah 1:8 a valley. There's one paraphrased version that actually calls it the Kidron Valley. So let me show you this. I'm going to go back to my visit to Jerusalem. This was fun. So I really enjoy what I'm going to share with you here. This was one more from my visit to Israel in 2018. And as I had mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned it, but in 2018, we went in the fall. In the spring of that year, in 2018, under the first time of President Bush, Trump, the first time Trump was in office, he moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem in the spring of 2018. It had always been in Tel Aviv, and that was supposed to be this big issue that was going to cause problems and all that. But he moved and put the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. So when I was there on our day off, one of our final days while in Jerusalem, of course, if any of you guys know my son Brad is a U.S. history and politics geek, and he loves this stuff. So I said, hey, Brad, let's go to the U.S. Embassy. Let's see if we can get someone to take us there. So we just went out and we got a taxi cab driver and said, hey, could you take us to the U.S. Embassy? So it costs a lot more than I wanted to spend because, they're expensive, these taxis in Jerusalem. But he took us to the U.S. Embassy, There we are. There's on our way up. And this is south of Jerusalem where the new U.S. Embassy came in 2018. And we couldn't go inside, and there was a whole line of people. But the guards there told us we could go get a picture next to the plaque on the side of the wall of the embassy. And there's one of my favorite pictures when we were in Jerusalem. There's me and my son Brad at the embassy of the United States of America in Jerusalem, the year that it was put there, Donald Trump president. Anyways, that was a great, we got a picture in front of the plaque at the U.S. Embassy the year it was placed in Israel. So now, all that really was a side note, but that was fun. Then our taxi cab driver said, "Hey, let me show you a great view of Jerusalem." We said, "Oh, okay." So he stopped at this park, and this is the park, and we're south. The U.S. Embassy is a couple blocks behind me, a couple blocks south of me, but this is a southern view of Jerusalem. I'm looking straight north here, and I'm on a mountain or a hill. Now, I got to tell you this. This is another, one of these things. I don't know what you'll think about it. I find it kind of ironic, but the hill we're standing on here is called the hill or the mountain of evil counsel. Ooh, and I looked into this, and it's be called the mountain of evil counsel. There's a few things. The Christian tradition was that Caiaphas lived here, and this is where they paid Judas to betray Christ. I don't think that's true, but that's what some do. In Hebrew tradition, there's two reasons why it's called the Hill of Evil Counsel. They believe this is where Absalom conspired against his father David. And the other thing which I found interesting is they believe that this mountain or this hill is where Solomon built the high place for the god Chemosh and Molech, as written in 2 Kings 11:7. If you read that verse, though, it says that he built it on the mountain east of Jerusalem. Now, technically, we're south, but we're also, the top of the mountain is southeast. So it could be that. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what in the past happened on this mountain, but this I know. The mountain we're standing on, the hill we're on, is called and known as the Hill of Evil Counsel. Now, where I'm standing, where I'm taking this picture from, to the right, if I go to the right, which is east of me, you actually go to the very top, the topmost part of this mountain, and I have to show you what is located on the top of the Hill of Evil Counsel in Jerusalem. This is my picture. It's the United Nations building, which is what's at the top of the. Anyways, I just find that kind of funny. Maybe it's not so funny. I don't know. But that is what's at the top of this mountain. We're just to the left of this here at this park with this beautiful overlook looking north to Jerusalem. Now, I want to show you this. If you didn't have all the buildings here and you just had the land, you could see this much easier. But here, looking north to Jerusalem, here where there's a tower, that's the Mount of Olives. This high point, this mountain on this side with that tower is the Mount of Olives. Here on the other side, where there's a tower, the Tower of David, it's called in Jerusalem, this is Mount Zion. These are the two mountains, the two tallest prominent mountains in Jerusalem. There's other mountains, but these two prominent ones, looking from the south, the Mount of Olives and Mount Zion. And in between is the ravine, or the Kidron Valley, goes between these two mountains, Mount of Olives, Mount Zion. But what's right in the center is Mount Moriah, or the Temple Mount. The temple from the south sits directly between these two mountains. And understanding that, this makes a lot of sense. That out from Jerusalem, have you ever heard this? It's a song, but it's actually straight out of scripture. Let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of Jacob's God. He will teach us his ways. We will walk in his paths. Let us go to the mountain of the Lord. Out of Jerusalem will go forth the law. This is where Jesus will rule in the millennial reign in his kingdom. And it's from here that he will send forth and rule the earth. So that, I think, makes a lot of sense in this vision of these four chariots going out from between the two mountains. So anyways, a little bit about the two mountains. Now, so what are these? So what are these chariots with these horses going out from the two mountains represent? What are these? These are the four spirits of heaven going forth. Now, so the four chariots with the red, white, black, dappled horses represent four spirits of heaven going forth. This is the only place in the Bible where you see the four spirits of heaven. But the word spirit in the Hebrew is the word ruach. And this word can be translated spirit, wind, or breath. There's no other place in the Bible where four spirits from heaven are mentioned, but there's many references in the Bible to the four winds of heaven. And many English translations translate this verse as such. The New Catholic Bible, the four winds of heaven. American Standard Bible, the four winds of heaven. The Complete Jewish Bible, the four winds of the sky. The English Standard Version, the ESV, the four winds of heaven. Now, I'm going to go through this quickly. We went over this in the Daniel class, but all this is in the notes if you have your syllabus. If you want to look at the four winds in more detail, I'm just going to quickly go over this, show you that these four winds, when the four winds of heaven go out, it's usually judgment. It's God sending his judgment on the earth. In Daniel 7:2, he was looking, and four winds of heaven, and they stirred up the great sea, and the four beasts came up. In Jeremiah 49:36, from Elon, the four winds of heaven will scatter, and there will be no more nation. Ezekiel 37:9, when Ezekiel prophesies in the dry bones, he prophesies, come from the four winds, that the four winds is where he prophesies to. In Daniel 8:8, the horns go out to the four winds. In Daniel 11:4, the kingdom goes out to the four winds. Now, in those records in 8 and 11, I think it's talking about directional, north, south, east, west. But often the winds represent judgment. We saw it in Zechariah 2:6, flee, have you've been dispersed as the four winds of heaven. In Matthew 24:31, talking about when Christ returns, the trumpet sounds, and he will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. So they represent direction on the earth, and they represent judgment. On Mark 13:27, he sent forth his angel and will gather his elect from the four winds. And this one is really interesting. Revelation 7:1, he said, I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth, so that no wind would blow on the earth. So that's a real interesting look, especially in light of this vision in Zechariah, that Revelation 7:1. But when we looked at this in the Daniel class, it's real interesting. Again, all these verses are in your notes if you want to look at this in more detail. In the Bible, there's an east wind, a north wind, a south wind, and a west wind. And always, most often, these are associated with God, some type of God's judgment on the earth. For instance, in Exodus 10:13, an east wind brought the locusts on Egypt. In Exodus 10:19, a west wind carried the locusts away. In Exodus 14:21, an east wind divided the Red Sea. In Psalm 28:26, he says he causes the east wind to blow into heaven, and his power is directed to the south wind. In Isaiah 27:8, he says, with a fierce wind, he has expelled them on the day of the east wind. Again, expelled, a judgment. Zechariah 9:14, which we'll look at when we get to chapter 9, God appeared over them, and his arrow went forth like lightning, and God will blow the trumpet and march in the storm winds of the south. God will march in the winds. And in Jeremiah 18:17, he says, like an east wind, I will scatter them before the enemy. So the winds, and from a physical point of view, we see how the winds affect things, right? Hurricanes and tornadoes and the things that winds do. So you can understand how this is a physical thing on earth, also is a metaphor for God's judgment from the four corners of the earth. In the book of Jeremiah, judgment on Jerusalem is presented as a scorching wind, chariots like a whirlwind, horses swifter than eagles. That's from Jeremiah 14:11. It's like a scorching wind. Chariots like a whirlwind, it says in verse 13. Chariots. Hey, well, we're talking about chariots here. Like a whirlwind, swifter than eagles. So these four chariots by four horses are going out from between the two mountains, and they're the four winds going forth, after standing before the Lord of all the earth. I think this is God's judgment that goes out in the final days. And he says they're sent to patrol the earth. The first ones went out to patrol the earth, but they were kind of going out as reconnaissance. These have a different purpose. These strong ones are going out to patrol the earth, and they are to appease God's wrath. In the end, this final vision, God's wrath is appeased. Just to let you know, the word here is not actually wrath, it's actually the word spirit, the Hebrew word spirit. And the English, different versions, I think, have this. English Standard Version, they set my spirit at rest. NET, have brought me peace. King James Version, they have quieted my spirit. Christian Standard Bible, they have pacified my spirit. The Good News Translation, they have quieted the Lord's anger. When things have been satisfied, you're at ease. God's spirit is pacified. He's peaceful. His wrath is appeased. So that's really what it means, is God's spirit, it's over with. It's over with. God's wrath is appeased. The first vision, the patrols went out and found the earth. Remember in the first vision? They found the earth as peaceful and quiet, but Yahweh of hosts was very angry with the nations that are at ease. Remember that from the first vision? The man who was standing among the myrtle trees answered and said, these are those whom the Lord has sent to patrol the earth. And they said, we have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth is peaceful and quiet. So the angel who was speaking with me said, proclaim, saying, thus says Yahweh of hosts, I am exceeding zealous for Jerusalem and Zion, but I am angry with the nations who are at ease. God had wrath towards the nations. For a while I was only a little angry, they furthered the disaster. Then you have all the visions. We get to the eighth vision. These four chariots go out from between the two mountains, and after they go out and patrol the earth, now in this final and eighth vision, the patrol chariots go out and God's wrath is appeased. And that's the eighth vision. So that's just a brief summary. I want to just review now these visions that we looked at before we go to and we'll just look at the rest of the chapter here to end the night. But first, let's remember what happened here. So far, what we've looked at here. The Jews returned to the land of Israel around 530 BC, and they begin to rebuild the temple, laying the foundation under the leadership of Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest. Under the reign of Cambyses, construction is halted until the second year of Darius of Persia. Then around 520 BC, Haggai and Zechariah begin to prophesy, and the Jews continue with the work to rebuild the temple starting in the 6th month of the second year of Darius. In Zechariah 1:6, in the 8th month of the second year, Darius prophesies telling the Jews to repent and return to Yahweh of hosts. Then, from Zechariah 1:7 through where we just ended, chapter 6, verse 8, all took place on the 24th day of the 11th month in the second year of Darius. And on this day, Zechariah received 8 visions, which he prophesied to Zerubbabel and Joshua and the rest of the Jews working on the temple reconstruction. And once again, here are the 8 visions. First, horsemen were sent to patrol the earth. In the first vision, Zechariah is shown horsemen on red sorrel and white horses standing in a ravine among the myrtle trees, or possibly in the valley among the mountains. These are those that Yahweh has sent to patrol the earth. They find the earth is peaceful and quiet, but God's city, Jerusalem, is laid waste for the past 70 years. Yahweh of hosts is angry with the nations and declares that he will return to Jerusalem with compassion and that his house will be built in it. A measuring line will be stretched over Jerusalem. Yahweh will again choose Jerusalem. The second vision, Zechariah 1:18 through 21, 4 craftsmen defeating 4 horns. In the next vision, Zechariah sees 4 horns who have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. We know specific nations that surrounded Jerusalem that were trying to disrupt the building of the temple. In 2 Kings, just before the temple was destroyed, 4 nations are specifically named: bands of Chaldeans, Armenians, Moabites, and bands of Ammonites. These same nations, 70 years later, are putting fear into the Jews and construction stopped. God promises to send 4 craftsmen to throw down these 4 horns who lifted up their horns against the land of Judah. In the third vision, Zechariah 2, chapter 2, is a man with a measuring line. In the third vision, Zechariah is shown a man with a measuring line who is told to measure Jerusalem. He states that Jerusalem will be inhabited and that Yahweh will be a wall of fire around here. This would have been a strong encouragement to Zerubbabel and Joshua to build the temple and not be afraid. Also in this vision, he encourages those in Babylon to escape and flee from the land of the north. In a prophetic vision of the future, he promises that he will dwell in their midst, and many nations will join themselves to Yahweh in that future day. Yahweh will possess Judah in the Holy Land, and he will again choose Jerusalem. Chapter 3 is the fourth vision, the reclothing of the high priest. In the fourth vision, Zechariah sees Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of Yahweh, and Satan, or an accuser, is there to accuse him. Satan is rebuked, and Joshua's filthy garments are removed, and he is told his iniquity is taken away from him. He is reclothed with festival robes, and a clean turban is placed on his head. This would have been a strong encouragement to Joshua if he was feeling unworthy to take on what would be his responsibility as high priest. Yahweh has cleansed him. If he walks in the way of Yahweh of hosts, then he would govern the house of God. Furthermore, he is told that he and his associates sitting in front of him would be symbolic of the servant of Yahweh, the branch, the stone, which had 7 eyes. And in that day, the iniquity will be removed, and everyone will sit under his own vine and fig tree. Chapter 4 is the fifth vision, a golden lampstand flanked by 2 olive trees. In the fifth vision, Zechariah is shown a golden lampstand flanked by 2 olive trees that are pouring golden oil into the bowl, and it is sent to the 7 lamps of the lampstand. He is told this vision is the word of Yahweh to Zerubbabel, that it's not by might or power, but by his spirit. He's told that Zerubbabel not only laid the foundation, but that he will bring forth the top stone, the capstone, and he will complete this construction of the temple. Though there may be those that despise what might be thought of as a small thing, When these see the top stone in the hand of Zerubbabel, they will rejoice. The seven eyes of Yahweh will rejoice. Zechariah asks about the two olive trees. He's told that these are the sons of fresh oil that are standing by the Lord of the whole earth. We know from Ezra 6:14 and 15, when the temple was completed in the 6th year of Darius, 3.5 years, that the elders of Jews were successful through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Edo, the two olive trees. In the future, there will also be two prophets, olive trees, in the end times at a future temple. Zechariah chapter 5, 1 through 4 is the flying scroll, a curse over all the earth. In the 6th vision, Zechariah is shown a flying scroll, 20 cubits long, 10 cubits wide. He's told that this is the curse that is going over the face of all the earth. In the law, God set forth the blessing of obedience and the curse that will follow if Israel disobeys. This curse will fly around the whole earth. It won't rest on the undeserving, but for those who steal and for those who swear falsely, it will enter the house of the wicked and consume it. Thus, Zechariah's writing about these sins was an attempt to prick the heart of those involved so that they would stop their sinful behavior and live godly lives. Later on in the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, and Malachi, these sins show up from these Jewish exiles. Zechariah 5, 5 through 11 is a woman in an ephah, wickedness carried to Shinar. In the 7th vision, Zechariah is shown an ephah going forth a basket for measuring. He is told this ephah is their resemblance, eye, or iniquity. This seems to be a metaphor for covetousness, the lust of the eyes. And then a lead cover is lifted up, and sitting inside the ephah is a woman. Zechariah is told that this woman represents wickedness. Throughout the scripture, sexual immorality and covetousness are often linked together, and the evil adulterous woman is representative of this sin. This ephah is then picked up by two women, spirit beings, who carry this ephah to Shinar, Babylon, where the woman is seated on her temple. These exiles just came from Babylon. They had been removed from this wickedness and should not return. As well, this is eschatological in that in the end times, the woman, the great whore Babylon, will again influence the world with covetousness and sexual immorality. Then finally, tonight, the Lord's chariots patrolled the earth in Zechariah chapter 6, 1 through 8. Finally, in the 8th vision, Zechariah is shown chariots led by red, black, white, and dappled horses coming forth from between the two mountains, possibly meaning from the temple area in Jerusalem between the Mount of Olives and Mount Zion. Chariots most often represent an army or a battle in Scripture. Zechariah is told that this is the representation of four spirits or the four winds of the heaven going forth. The four winds often carry out God's judgment and wrath. They are told to walk about or patrol the earth. In the first vision, after patrolling the earth, the horse riders find the earth is at peaceful and quiet, but God's city, Jerusalem, is still laid waste for the past 70 years. Yahweh of hosts is angry with the nations, but now these chariots went forth to the north to have appeased God's wrath, quieted his spirit, and brought peace. This would have been a consolation to the exiles at this time. And looking ahead, in the end times, God's final wrath will be satisfied when the Messiah sits in the temple and judgment goes out from Jerusalem and true peace will come to all the earth. So there are the 8 visions that we've looked at the past 8 weeks in a nutshell. But the chapter's not over. So I just wanted to finish out the chapter. This is just additional information, kind of interesting. After the 8th vision, then the word of the Lord came also to Zechariah on this 24th day of the 11th month. In verse 10, he says, take an offering from the exiles, from Heldai, Tobijah, Jedediah, and you go to the same day and enter the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah, where they have arrived from Babylon. Take silver and gold, make an ornate crown, and set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Then say to him, thus says Yahweh of hosts, behold, a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is, and he will build the temple of Yahweh. Yes, it is he who will build the temple of Yahweh, and he who will bear the honor and sit and rule on his throne. Thus he will be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace will be between the two offices. Now the crown will become a reminder in the temple of Yahweh to Helem, Tobijah, Jedediah, and Hen, the son of Zephaniah. Those who are far off will come and build the temple of Yahweh. Then you will know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me to you, and it will take place if you completely obey Yahweh, your God. So what is going on here? Who are these individuals listed in verse 10 and 14? This is what I could tell is exactly what the NET Bible says, except for Joshua, the high priest. None of these individuals is otherwise mentioned anywhere in Scripture, and therefore they cannot be further identified. Who are these guys? I don't know if they had just arrived from Babylon or if they had come with the exiles. I try to look at the names, and I don't think there's any. This chart is in your notes if you want to look at it. The one thing I'm pretty sure of, though, is that in verse 10, Heldai, Tobijah, Jedediah, they go to the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah, I believe are the same four listed in verse 14, except their name is Helem, Tobijah, Jedediah, and Hen, the son of Zephaniah. I'm pretty sure they're both the same people. That Helem and Hen are different, but I think they're the same. So these four go to the house of Josiah, the son of Zephaniah. So there's four of them, and they take a golden ornate crown and they set it on Joshua, the high priest. And then he tells them really eschatological information about the coming Messiah. They set this crown on the head of Joshua, the high priest, and they say to him, behold, a man, you see that? A man whose name is the branch, for he will branch out from where he is, and he, this man coming in the future, will build the temple of Yahweh. And we know this is a messianic term for Jesus. He is that man, that branch, the Messiah who's coming in the future. Verse 13, yes, it is he who will build the temple of Yahweh, and he who will bear the honor and sit and rule on his throne. Thus he will be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace will be between the two offices. And then it says, with this man, then those who are afar off will come and build the temple of Yahweh. This again is a future building that is to happen. Here at the time of Zechariah, the man Zerubbabel was governor, building the temple of Yahweh, along with another man, Joshua the high priest. Apparently, these individuals made a crown, or they took a crown that was already made, and they placed it on Joshua's head. And this was to be a memorial, a remembrance for these individuals, so that those who are far off could be speaking of those who came at this time, coming afar off from Babylon to build the temple. But I think in the future, we're talking about Gentile nations, as well as Jews scattered around the world, who will come and be part of the rebuilding in a future time. There is a time in the future when the Messiah, the branch, will sit as both king and high priest on his throne in the temple in the millennial kingdom in Jerusalem. From Psalm 110, my Lord says unto Yahweh, or Yahweh says unto my Lord, talking about the Messiah, you are a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And he's talking about the king coming in the future. Up until this time, even at this time when they're building, there were always two different men occupying the two offices. high priest and king, or high priest and government ruler. But when the Messiah, Jesus, rules, these two offices are going to be occupied by one man, the branch, who will be both king and high priest. And this is one of the verses that clearly shows this here in Zechariah. In the future, the Messiah will build his temple. Now, metaphorically, Jesus in his resurrected body is the temple raised again, the church, his body, and he is the chief cornerstone. And we are members of that body. We are part of the temple of God. Yet in the millennial kingdom that's still coming, foreigners will come and help build a future temple at that time, an actual physical temple where people from around the world will come and build this temple at that time. So it's like we have this reality now of being the temple, but there's a future time coming when everything's going to come together there. At the end, Jesus will be king and high priest out of Jerusalem. The law will go forth, and he will sit as king and priest on his temple. And that'll be, and you know what else? Just to give you another side note, it says in Revelation, we are going to be priests and kings on the earth, ruling under the Messiah. What's up with that? Anyway, there's something for you to think about of what's happening. And this is reference to this millennial age. So, just to summarize, what can we learn about the time of Haggai and Zechariah? In the eighth vision, Zechariah sees 4 chariots led by red, black, white, and dappled horses. They're going out from between 2 mountains, the Mount of Olives and the Mount Zion in Jerusalem. They patrol the earth and find God's wrath is appeased. His spirit is at rest. In the first vision, God was angry with the nations. Now his wrath is appeased. Zechariah prophesies next, that 4 men, Heldai, Tobijah, Jedediah, and Josiah, will make an ornate crown, set it on Joshua the high priest. The man, the branch, will sit in the temple as king and priest, and the council of peace will be with him. He further tells of a time when those who are far off will come and build the temple of Yahweh. What can we learn about future prophecy? At the end of the age, 4 angels are going to hold back the 4 winds until it's time, and the 4 winds will bring forth God's final wrath out from Jerusalem between the 2 mountains. After the wrath of God comes and his spirit is at ease, the wrath of God is over, then the branch, the Messiah, will sit as king and priest. Both Jews and Gentiles, from those who are far off, will come and build the temple of Yahweh. I get that there's going to be a temple at the end of the age, and I get that there's going to be a new temple under this supervision of Jesus. That's going to happen then. What can we learn practically for us today? Again, today we are the temple of God. We are part of those who are afar off. Jesus is our king and our high priest. And this rebuilding of the spiritual temple has begun with us as we go out to witness and bring people in. But yet to come, there is a physical temple in the millennial reign of Christ that's coming. And when Christ comes back, the dead are raised from the 4 winds of the earth, right? He's going to call forth, and the dead will be raised, and this new time will begin when Jesus rules as king and priest. We are under him, the new heaven and earth. Well, not new heaven and earth, the new earth, the new millennial reign of Christ. So there's chapter 6 tonight, and that's all for tonight. Next week, we will begin looking into chapter 7 and 8, which deals, that also occurs during this time of the 3.5 years. I believe it's in the 4th year of Darius that we're going to look at in the next 2 chapters, and what happens then It's different from these seven visions, but it's very interesting, and we'll take a look at that next time.